Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for an extremely timely topic, and in many ways, thanks to China and their recent export controls on a number of rare earths. My name is Karl Friedhoff. I'm the Senior Fellow for Asia Studies here at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and the Council aims to foster a deeper understanding of global affairs and America's role in the world. Tonight's conversation is going to address the critical challenge for the United States in critical minerals and rare earth elements, and how and why the United States became dependent on foreign suppliers for these things. And perhaps we'll get into a bit, perhaps mostly focus on how the United States can then think about breaking that dependence as it looks to reshore, onshore, fringe shore a lot of these production facilities. Obviously, just days ago, this issue escalated dramatically with China's expanded export controls on these materials, and then the Trump administration responded with 100% tariffs on Chinese goods set to take effect on November 1st. We're very fortunate to have Paramita sitting on my far right, and Elena Harkness sitting to my immediate right, joining us tonight to help us understand what this escalation is going to mean for America's path toward critical mineral independence. Paramita Das serves as Chief Strategy Officer and Senior Advisor at Stardust Power, Inc., with over 20 years of experience in global metals and the mining sector. She previously spent 8 years at Rio Tinto, the world's second largest metals and mining corporation, serving as Global Head of Marketing, Development, and ESG for materials and minerals. She has held senior strategic roles at major corporations, including BP, and currently serves on the boards of Jinko Shipping and Trading and Coeur Mining. Sorry to continue to read this, but I don't want to miss anything, and they have rather long CVs as well. Elena Harkness leads current Chicago-based Water Innovation Hub and Great Lakes Renew, the National Science Foundation-supported Great Lakes Water Innovation Engine. Prior, she held roles at MacArthur, Brookings, RW Ventures, and the Chicago Community Trust. She has published widely for Brookings, the Chicago Tribune, City Lab, and a number of others, as well as being a member of the Economic Club of Chicago and a 2024 Crain's Notable Leader in Sustainability. The last thing I'll note is that if you look on the back tables, there is a report recently published by the Council looking at critical minerals in the United States and what the strategy should look like for moving forward to try to regain some sort of independence on this. We're going to speak for about 40 minutes via discussion on the panel, and at that point, we'll open it up for audience Q&A. So please think of your questions and hold your questions to that point. And for our viewers online, you can contribute questions at ccga.live. We'd also like to remind everyone that today's program is on the record, and any views expressed by speakers we host here at the Council are their own and do not reflect any institutional positions. Okay, here we go. If you've been following this issue, I'm sure there's various levels of knowledge on critical minerals. There are people who are intimately involved in this and have been working on this for a number of years, people on the panel, and others who have probably read about this in a Financial Times headline or a New York Times headline. And so while there are, for some of these topics, the audience is perhaps closer together, I feel like on this topic, there's probably a much wider range of background knowledge. And so one of the things I'd like to do to kick off is turn to Paramita. And if you can just tell us a little bit about how we interact with critical minerals in our daily lives. Where do we see these things? How do they show up? And then as a second part of that question, how did we get here? You know, this idea that the US is dependent on China for critical minerals didn't come out of nowhere. And in fact, we've been well aware of our dependence on China for these things since at least 2011, when China looked to restrict critical mineral exports to Japan as a part of the dispute that they were having. And in the time that's followed, basically nothing has been done. So the first part of that, what are they? How do we interact with them? And the second, how do we get here and why are we here now?
Thanks, Karl. Great to be here. Thank you for listening to us and thank you for entertaining this topic. I have to first thank a board member of the council who introduced me to the work that is being done in the council, and it's pretty impressive. Can I just ask by way of hand, how many of you read news when you hear the word critical minerals or rare earth these days? All right, there's a large number of group. Thank you. Thank you for doing that, by the way. I always say we are getting our 2 minutes of fame right now. How many of you read or thought about it, say, 5 years back? 5 hands. Perfect. And that tells you the story, right? It was the word critical and rare were injected to make sure you and I actually consider it. Rare is not rare. It is in everywhere. And critical can be critical if we allow it to be. So that's essentially the premise that we have to go into. Karl's question about where is it used? Everywhere. Look around you, it's in your pocket right now. And why it's important, I love the fact that Karl mentioned that we have known about it since 2011, actually 2010, when the embargo went in, but we didn't consider it critical enough. And the reason was, at that point, it wasn't tangible, physical, or commercial where it pinched. But today, why more hands are going up? Because if we don't get those critical minerals, your and my cell phones are at risk. Our defense missile systems could be at risk. We could be leading to a point where we might not have semiconductors. So a lot of that, what we see around, might be at risk. And then more than anything else, again, by a show of hand, who likes what AI is doing to the world today?
Can we ask the opposite question as well? Who doesn't like what it's
Who
doing
doesn't
to the
like
world?
AI is very... But the good thing is that AI wouldn't exist if we didn't have these critical minerals. Our aircrafts wouldn't exist. So they are everywhere. They are very prevalent. These are the silent threads that basically have tied the digital and the physical world. We just didn't pay attention to them. But actually, the attention was paid by the mineral sector. And Karl and I have had this discussion several times. The mineral sector had been raising their hand and saying, we are confusing convenience with reliance. We are thinking about everything that we consider as available with resilience, and we lost that battle. Why did we reach where we are today? I always say ideology and geology don't always go together. They sometimes just bifurcate. We cannot dictate geology. Mother Nature is what Mother Nature has given. But ideologies define where we are. You all saw the news a couple of days back about the restriction that US received with regards to rare earth. Can we actually give ourselves this false sense of hope and false sense of security that that is it? If we solve critical minerals and if we solve for rare earth, the problem has been solved? The answer is absolutely not. This is a progressive escalation. For rare earth, we started with gallium and germanium, went on to a few. Today, it's at 12 out of 17. But that's enough to have everybody sit up in their chairs because that restricts the global supply chain. And the chokehold, believe it or not, is not on the geology side. The chokehold is on the step next to it. Because you and I cannot look up for rocks everywhere. But if we take the rocks, we can process, we can actually refine them and make something out of it. We took our ball out of the refining, what we call messy, the messy middle part of the processing, because it's happening 10,000 miles away from us. Why do we care? As long as we get our gadgets, as long as we are getting our cell phones, as long as our computers work beautifully. But we did not realize that what we were thinking or giving ourselves that false sense of security, that if we want the parts, they will appear, that went away. And now we are realizing that if we don't invest, by the way, the country that is actually talking to us about these restrictions, they are not endowed with all the minerals that they actually make, but they're taken from everywhere and they process. And that is where we miss the plot. We need to take the narrative back. We need to bring it back home and focus on the choke point, which is the refining and the processing side. But I'm sure there's going to be more to come, so I'm going to give the forum back. I can probably bore you to death about this topic.
That's a great place to leave off, because I would like to bring in Elena on this. I know you're doing work that's looking at how we make better use of some of the wastewater, of some of the runoff, and how we go about standing up this refining process. Part of the reason I think we did this was that the market had basically decided that we can do it cheaper, faster, and we can also outsource the environmental cost if someone else wants to take this on. So now we're starting to move back in the other direction. But I want to turn to you, Elena, and ask, what are the challenges with this? So, there is a need for the focus on this midstream production. That's the processing and the refinement. How much can we expect the U.S. to build? What are the environmental challenges with that? And how do we go about solving that? Because once you start to do this, if you look at the example of Australia's operations in Malaysia, they were shut down due to radioactive runoff. The radioactivity was then natural in the feedstock, and the IAEA looked at this and said it's not a danger to humans, but try introducing that to a community. Of course, you're going to get a large amount and very strong community pushback. So how do we balance those demands with what the United States needs in terms of shoring up its defense industry, consumer industry, along with the kind of community needs to feel safe and protected from things that they deem as dangerous?
Yeah, so a lot in that question, and a wonderful setup from Paramita. So thank you so much, and thank you, Karl, for the great paper that pointed us, I think, to this very important part of the supply chain, the processing. I think we need to, just to do a little backup and level setting, and why I, as the leader of a water innovation hub, am sitting here on the stage. There is quite a lot of resources that we waste or flush away in our water and wastewater today. That includes critical minerals, rare earths. It also includes a lot of other things that are in rare supply on the planet, things like phosphorus that are nutrients that support fertilization and all of our food supply. It also includes energy. There's so much in our current water cycle today in the way that we treat, move, and manage our water and wastewater that is leaving valuable resources on the table that we could put into productive use elsewhere, and also leaving harmful contaminants behind. So that central grand challenge that we have to move to a more circular means and methods of water management to both recover things that are valuable and also keep contaminants under control and where they belong. That's really the central grand challenge behind a National Science Foundation engine that my team leads called Great Lakes Renew. And the reason that we have support from the National Science Foundation, the reason that was selected as one of just 9 of these big regional engines across the country is because, number one, water security is our national security, and number two, one of the things that we want to recover from that wastewater supply chain is this critical mineral and critical resource supply chain issue that we know is also driving a major national concern. So it's that pairing of issues for us that has put us in the middle of this critical mineral conversation. I think, Karl, you teed up something very important, which is this notion that there's a trade-off. If we're going to do more processing here, which, by the way, we can't build our way and mine our way into domestic supplies of critical minerals and materials, right? It takes too long. It's going to take many decades for us to build the mines that we would need to be able to do that domestically. So we have to look to processing as a major source of that. I think that's become kind of established. If we're going to do more processing, we need to find ways to recover the valuable things without creating downstream contamination. That is a major challenge, but it's also a technical challenge that we have the opportunity to invest in and address. There's a framing challenge, like you said, Paramita, that we can't dictate geology. Water, in much the same way, does not respect national boundaries or borders, and we cannot continue to define the water challenges that mining creates as purely local challenges that are problematic for the communities where those mines are located. Water security is truly a national security priority, and water and wastewater treatment ought to be national security investments. And that's our view of this. So the parallel investments in finding the tools and technologies to recover those critical minerals and materials also have to be paired with investments in ensuring that we aren't causing downstream contamination to the wastewater and the water sources that we all depend on for our lives and livelihoods.
Just one quick follow-up. When we talk about recovery from wastewater and other runoff, do you have a rough percentage that we can recover, not in terms of the percent what's in there that we can recover, but how that would go towards meeting U.S. domestic demand? Have you seen any numbers thrown about that, about what might be there that is recoverable and how how that will help us?
So I think the question about what's recoverable and what's economically feasible to recover, there's a big gulf between those things right now. The latest, I did have stats recently pulled, the 27 key minerals that we're looking for, we could get import substitution volumes at less than 0.1% to 10% recovery rates from U.S. mines. Now that's not all what we call like techno-economically feasible, right? So it has to, first we have the technology to do it, then we have to make it cost effective and possible, right? So a lot of what we are doing in our Renew engine is working across a spectrum of invention to piloting and deployment and adoption, because what we need is breakthrough materials, we need processes and sensors and all of the things to find where we can discover and remove these valuable materials at rates that are economically feasible, but we also need to be able to scale up the production of those new materials. And so right now there's a full spectrum across, invention to piloting and deployment that's going to be really important to making this breakthrough possibility even feasible. But the answer, I think the short answer to your question is there's a strong belief that there's material out there in mines and brines that we can recover and start to meet some significant portion of this domestic demand.
On the economic feasibility piece of this, I want to bring in you, Paramita, and talk about, why have companies been so reticent to invest in this? We can see the demand, we know that it's there, the materials may not be there, but what has led to this question of economic feasibility, and why is the investment not flowing to the point that now the government is having to come in to do this, right? And we've seen the government step in to the tune of $400 million here, $1 billion there. JP Morgan just announced $1.5 trillion investment that is going to do. So can you just talk a little bit, especially from the mining side, about the economic feasibility, just to help level setting as well?
I'll jump off of where you left off. So if you actually spend a little time, and there's a book that I would strongly recommend. It's by a gentleman called Ernest Schneider, The War Below. And it has nothing to do with the war. It's everything to do with mining. But I love the fact that he used the word war in it. And we are in that area. And that's where it comes out to. Your question about the reticence thus far of the industrial partners to jump in. And here is what I would say. The industrial policies today are now helping. And many of you would have seen that there has been investment by the government in various projects. The first one to our, very frankly, relief was MP Materials that went out. And MP Material, when they received that the government support and then the investment directly from the Department of War, they also came with a price floor. And why we should all ask ourselves, why is that price floor important? The price floor actually allows the government to say, I have got your downside risk covered, go build up, private sector, go build up for the upside. And that is extremely essential. And, Karl, you are right. The math when you pencil in is difficult. I'll talk about lithium very quickly, because today we are talking about rare earth, and in this progressive escalation, I can tell you there will be a lithium story that will come in, and that will make us not only sit up on our seat, probably get us jumping out of our skin. And the reason is, lithium is actually going to be required for everything that we want today. We need it for electrification, we need it for the data centers, for AI. We do need it not only for medicinal use, but it will be required for your satellites, the defense sectors. How do we provide the storage for even the drones that are working in various facets? But if China actually restricts the supply chain for lithium, what would we do? And why haven't we invested in it? And I'll give you the pure math around it, and you'll draw your own conclusion. An American company can do the best they can, build out a project with the best economics, reduce the cost, make sure they're doing everything from the sustainability side right. And they have it ready for the private sector to invest. But then China comes out and floods the market for 6 months, whereby the global price is set, not because of the materials that we're producing here, but producing, 80% of this material is coming out of one country. If they flood the market for 6 months, the whole economics of that project goes down. The IRR gets completely burned, and it's very difficult for people who believe in commerce and who believe in the free economy to actually justify such a project. That has been the history. When you look at lithium again, you're looking at a price volatility from 2022 where the price went all the way to 80,000. And today it could be sub 10. In commodities market, there has to be some reason. It's very simple. Commodities sector is not difficult. It's very plain vanilla, black and white story. But none of us could justify from a rational perspective why the price volatility would be that high. And the story is very simple. When you are controlling 80% of one commodity, 90% of the refining capacity for rare earth, and 100% of the graphite anodes, you can open and close that faucet very easily. Now, personally, this is where I actually give compliment to all the companies like yours who have jumped in to work in the critical minerals sector. And I'll give the example of my company, Stardust Power. It took courage to jump into lithium, but it takes even greater courage to actually sell the story because we are all believers. And Stardust Power is not only a company, it's an anchor in the heartland. You're building this lithium refinery in the center of Oklahoma, covering our customers with rail, river, and roadway, and making sure you're next to not only the input materials, but also access to the customers. But in doing so, you are actually making the industrial policies an industrial reality. And we have to live in the realism of today that we cannot have the same playbook that we used to have earlier, where if you are given a choice, where would you invest? Would you invest in an AI upcoming company called OpenAI, or would you invest in a lithium refining company? Well, I can tell you, I don't even need to take a poll. I know the response to that. But today, for the OpenAI company or for similar such companies that are coming out, we need the lithium refineries. We do need the MP materials. We need the Stardust Powers. So the government intervention call is like putting a pedestal to say, you do what you need to do, I've got your back covered. I will take one more stab. What the government is doing today is not much required. And hopefully there will be more to come. But we need to build ecosystems. Because it's not just about building it. We need to draw the line between the dots to say, here is where your mines are. Now you take it to the refinery. Oh, by the way, this is who your CAM producer is. And now take it to the actual battery producers. That ecosystem is what has made our competitors so powerful. Those ecosystems are now required. And this only the government can help us with, because otherwise we are going to run in individual swim lanes and keep tripping over each other, behaving as if we are competing with each other. For many of our customers, and Stardust Power customers are actually online, I give thanks to them. I only wish we could move at the speed with which they are moving. Our customers are moving at fantastic speed. All the OEMs, they are moving at a speed to make and correct this. For the mining sector, the materials sector, and especially the processing sector, we do need to move at the same speed. And for that, we do need the help of government and for everything that's happening today.
So I want to follow up on that. Yeah.
I was going to say, I want to build on that.
Oh, yeah, please. Then you go right ahead.
Well, it's such a perfect tee up on this point of industrial policy and why I am so grateful we have programs like the Engines program that have picked up this idea that there are big grand challenges that our country needs to grapple with that require ecosystem orchestration.
Absolutely.
And investment all across the supply chain and all parts of it. But it's that ecosystem orchestration piece in particular that where our nonprofit organization sits is that exact role. Our biggest opportunity is to make the case so clear that there needs to be this investment, that there is opportunity that is untapped right now, and that we can help knit the investment in the early stage R&D, which that is a very essential role that our federal government has historically played, right? In the early stage moonshot ideas, we don't know what their commercial vitality is going to be over time, but we have a portfolio of investments and breakthrough ideas, and the government's playing a role there. It's also, we're connecting then those breakthrough ideas to the companies that want to find the startups that want to find the bigger industrials, right? How do we help them de-risk and demonstrate and prove this out? And I think that is, absolutely the ecosystem role that we need, locally rooted quarterbacks kind of playing that role, but also connected to companies that have that broader national vision and global scale.
Well, I want to go back to the point you made about MP materials. For those who are unfamiliar with the deal, you kind of mentioned that the deal was in place. That the United States government took a 15% stake. It's now the largest shareholder in MP materials. The investment, I believe, was $400 million. The floor price that they put in was $110 per kilogram, which is double the market rate. And this is something that, historically in the U.S. at least, we followed the dogma of free markets, that free markets should decide these things. And now we're seeing the government kind of come back in and going to put their thumb on the scale, perhaps picking national champions, picking winners in this way. But the question of, yes, we may need more government policy. The question I want to put to both of you is, where do we draw the line? We've talked a lot about in past administrations, and to be clear, this isn't a Republican or Democratic position on this. Industrial policy has been a through line from the Biden administration onwards. And so there was a collective decision that this was going to move forward. But in the Biden administration, there was a discussion about small garden high walls, that the things you're going to support should be relatively limited, and the ability to support those, you should have to meet a certain threshold to get in there. Now it seems that it's broadening out, the walls are lower, the garden is bigger, and the government is just going to continue to pour money into this, including into areas where the market may actually be able to solve these problems and we don't need government intervention. So where do we draw the line on this? And I bring this up as part of it, it's going to be all taxpayer funded. The money is going to be astronomical. When the DOE says it has a $1 billion fund, that is not going to be nearly enough. Right. It's going to be 10 times, 100 times that amount in the end. And all the while, we're going to see these things being built in communities. They're going to add stress to water resources. They're going to add stress to the electric grid, to bridges, to rail lines. So how do we go about justifying this to the local communities as well, showing them that this is a positive not only for the U.S. as a whole, but for your community? So where do we draw the line and how do we sell it to the American public? I'll throw that open to whoever wants to answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where do we draw the line? I will say that right now, the bigger garden, lower walls, I'll use Karl's analogy, is actually nothing different than what the free market should be doing. So we are, in a way, still in the free market environment. It's just right now, the government is becoming a customer. So the 15% investment in MP material also comes with a caveat that the government is actually take material off of MP material's hand. And the reason why that's important is that's for the use for the Defense Department. And that is for the use for everything that is being built around the defense sector, the national security sector. So now, companies like MP Material and hopefully someday Stardust Power has a captive customer called the United States government. And by the way, that credibility is extremely powerful. When the United States becomes your customer, trust me, other customers feel very much more confident. And what did we see right after the news of the MP Materials investment by the US government? Is that Apple came in. And that shows the trend. That playbook, by the way, is not new. That has been used. It just hasn't been used in the US before. Other countries have been using it all along. They have been helping the free market through a slight, very in the shadows, thumb on the scale. Mm-hmm. But now our government is doing it, and that is actually accelerating the news. When the government says, yes, we heard the news from JP Morgan, that 1.5 trillion comes in. Where do we draw the line? By this catalytic movement by the government, other companies, other free market participants are now weighing in. And that's the reason this room is filled up, because you are now interested in seeing what comes next. Because critical minerals and rare earth is not something that happens somewhere spoken by people who wear hard hats and probably carry spades. That's not the world we are living in. We are now, as users, becoming interested in hearing, where is our material coming from? Trust and transparency will be the next one. Because the United States government has weighed in and the allies are coming in, we have read in the news that the Australian government has actually sent their delegates over to speak to the United States government about how Australia can become the critical mineral partner for United States. The thing is, we have allied countries who have been on this path for longer. Canada, right next to us, they have been in the mining sector and the resource sector for much longer. We need to partner up with them to show that the United States government is taking this seriously. And you will see the effect it has. When US government puts their thumb on the scale, the whole world sits up and notice. By the way, can I just leave to Elena for one last thing? I'll share this one anecdote. A friend of mine texted me the other day after this news around rare earth came out and said, "Are we too late?" And without thinking, my fingers just went flying to the cell phone to say, we are probably late. But when it comes to the US, late is never equals to lost. And we've proven it time and again. And this is the time when we have an opportunity to prove that again, that when we wake up, we do things much smarter, better than anybody else, and we will do it faster and in the most advanced way possible.
No, I have to say that is a great way to conclude the program. However, we're not done yet, so we may have to come back to you for more final remarks.
Not say it.
So on industrial policy, do you have anything to add about how we balance this and sell it to communities as well?
All of it. Well, so I think your original question was like, how much is too much? And I think we have to recognize the deficit we're coming back from, right? Like, especially back to this investment in early stage R&D, how far we had been falling behind other parts of the world in government investment and all of that. That's really important. I also think the shortest answer to that question is there's always room for government intervention when there are market failures. And there have been market failures abounding in the space. There will continue to be. It's great that there are market signals and we're starting to wake up around some of these investments. But if you look at the looming water risk, for example, like globally, but also in communities where we're starting to see conflict, this is something that's going to have tremendous economic cost, and where government decisions about both investment and regulation of how we keep our water clean and secure are going to matter very much.
So far, we've talked a lot about what's happening domestically.
Yep.
I want to now turn to the international piece of this. One of the things that's made China so powerful is that it not only processes in China, but it operates mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It operates a lot of the processing in mines in Indonesia for nickel. And as critical minerals and rare earth elements have become kind of more newsworthy, more valuable, and more important to domestic economies, we've seen the funding set up for exploration has reached a peak. I believe in 2024, I think this year it has receded a little bit, but more countries are now looking for their own jackpots. And as they're doing so, they're now trying to then climb up the value chain. So they're not only digging things out of the ground, they're also interested in the processing, in some of the battery production as well. I want to turn to you both and ask, what does this mean for U.S. partnerships around the world, but also in target countries? How does the United States go about competing with China for some of these resources? That's not to say that they're going in and taking over. Of course, there's an investment, there's a deal that is made, and typically China is going to offer a much wider investment portfolio than the U.S. generally does. Is this something that we're going to see change? And what impact is that going to have? Are we looking at kind of, we use this term perhaps too loosely, but a new scramble for Africa, where suddenly we're going to see a lot more investment, a lot more money. And, in the past, the U.S. has generally taken a more limited approach to that. So what is the impact going to be on resource-rich countries in the coming decades?
Do you want to go with that? Or just start?
Yeah, I think you should start on this.
Sure. So first and foremost, you're absolutely right that we did not pay attention to many of the places that we should have and probably not let loose. To just give the audience a sense of scale, DRC, as was mentioned by Karl, 80% of the world's cobalt sits in DRC. It's just cobalt rich. It's actually resource rich, but cobalt definitely. And 80% of the mine ore body is owned by Chinese companies or processed by Chinese companies. Now, I'm not going to speak on the condition of what happens there, but one of the recognition, whether you go to DRC or you go to Guinea or you go to different countries in South Africa or Latin America, you will find that they are actually looking for alternatives. They are looking for alternative partners. And not because of anything. So would you and I. You don't want to be held with one partner all the time. That means consolidation risk that has its own set of risk mitigations that need to be addressed. And again, I come back to what better risk mitigation strategy than getting a help from the US. what is our play with, and I'll go back to some of the stats. Our lithium is being used in our aircrafts, in our defense system, in our batteries, in our cell phones, everywhere. Graphite is being used gallium is being used in 5G. You're using silver in high density, high velocity superconductors. You're using everything in your EV and mobility. We need these materials. And now we understand that for the kind of sense of security that we gave us, we lost out in thinking about efficiency, we lost out on the resilience premium. And we did not bake it into the algorithm for the math that we were doing for different investments. Now that we've realized, what can we do? US, along with its allies, can go into the countries and the places where China has. We can go in and actually have the same playbook that has been played. And by the way, they're looking for partners who invest to stay and to grow value versus partners who invest to extract and go. And that's the beauty of the kind of partner that US is. If we go into Africa and we go into Latin America and show that partnership, we can change the scope. It is not going to be inexpensive. Gone are the days when it will be cost effective, because now everybody knows that US is also trying to have a diversified supply chain. But even if you do that, and the next step in the process is all held in one country, we've defeated the purpose. And that's why I repeat myself again, that the processing and the refining side becomes the chokehold of these minerals. And by the way, we cannot solve for one mineral and feel good about it. There are 57 minerals in the critical minerals side, 17 for rare earth. We have to solve for all of them. It sounds more daunting than it really is. It's possible. And we are getting into a terrain. We are going to be playing in a terrain that has been beautifully sculpted by one country. But they did do it over the past few decades. And we know that we don't need decades to do what somebody has done. We can do it much faster. We do need to build that refining and the processing capacity. We need to bring it here such that we are now making our customers more, we are actually giving them the peace of mind in their supply chain. We need to nearshore. It's easier to say nearshore, but somebody actually at the council once said to me, the stick needs to be shortened. And from the start to the end, we need to shorten the stick, which means build more of that capacity in-house domestically. And what a great opportunity to actually create those jobs, bring that technology and that capacity back. This is a fantastic time, and I actually wrote on the wall, what a great time to be in manufacturing and industrials. It's very difficult to say it in Chicago, I know, but it is a fantastic time to be in industrials because we are getting to write the history, what the next few decades and in 20 years' time, we'll look back and say, we created history.
Before turning it over to you, one of the questions that your response begs about the U.S. as an investment partner, and I won't want to answer now, it's just kind of for everyone to think about. And I think there are several angles to come through this apart from what I think will be a knee-jerk reaction from some is, does the Trump administration make the United States a better or worse investment partner for many of these countries? And I think there's a couple ways to get at that, but that's something to think about, and perhaps we can discuss a little bit later. Elena, for a response.
I think one of the most interesting dynamics we are facing as an engine based here in our Midwestern region is the idea that we build things and deploy them right here in our own backyards. It's not the market we're talking about, right? That we're building technologies here that are going to help do cleaner, better, more effective mining wherever that is taking place. We see that now in our research partnerships where we have new materials invented here, out of Northwestern that are being tested and trialed with mining companies in South America, right? Yep. So it is a truly global economy, and it's one of the first, I think, the innovation economy that is global, that is situated right here in the Midwest, is a really powerful story. And I think it is a really exciting time to be in manufacturing and industrials with this broader aperture towards this waste to wealth opportunity that we have to do it differently, to think about material science, processing technologies, and all of the opportunity that we have to make more with the resources we already have in our backyards. And I think that is inspiring. We do have critical talent shortages, right? In this space, we need to train people, inspire people to come and work in these sectors. And one of the things that inspires me to work here is the idea that we can build a more resource secure future, not only for us here where we're sitting in the Great Lakes or for our country, but for the world, because it's truly a connected planet and all of our resources are intertwined, whether it's water or the geology that we're built on.
So you previewed my last question here, helpfully, I would add, and that is quite short and succinct before we get into audience Q&A. Does the United States have the labor force to do this? Is it trained? Is it ready? And are there, frankly, just enough people within the labor force to meet the demand? Go, Elena, do you want to, you kind of peaked this, so we'll start there.
Sure.
And we'll turn to Paramita.
So just broadly speaking, I will talk about just the water sector part of this, right? So this encompasses industrials, manufacturing, but also the utilities that we all depend on for water and wastewater treatment. There is a massive and widespread generational turnover in leadership within that sector. And so there's a really big opportunity to train and inspire people to take those jobs, work in that field. And we've been working on that starting very young, because right now, sitting here in Chicago, we don't have 100% of kids in Chicago that can look out and see our Great Lakes and great rivers and get inspired to go become the next wastewater processing engineers or material scientists. And that is a problem. We've got to create that narrative frame and inspirational opportunity. At the same time, we are also building programs that are training people for the trades, for engineering careers, right? So there's just this broad need to connect and inspire and train. But it's it's a domestic labor shortage for sure for water and wastewater. We've got a big opportunity in front of us.
I will add that, and just for fun, I'll take a contrarian view. Labor shortage? Probably not. Mining labor shortage? Probably yes.
Yes, right.
Yeah?
Yep.
And the reason I say that is today, just to give you a little bit of numbers so that you can take away and think about it, today the average age of mining engineers in the US is 50. And probably 50% of that are going to retire in the next 10 years. We produce around 200 mining engineers in the US today. Which is a
That's
year.
1 year, right?
One
Yeah.
year. And that's 1/10 of what China produces. They focus on mining engineers. Now, what does that tell you? That, we are doomed? No, absolutely not. Because, whether you're in Australia, you're in Canada, you're in Mongolia, or you're in Japan, when you use the word Colorado School of Mines, people sit up. They respect, because this was where many of these things started. And if we can just look at Colorado School of Mines and say, how is that possible? By the way, if you don't even have to go all the way to Colorado, if you go to Wacker, there is a mining company over there, and you just take a tour. They will give you a visual of what's happening in Nevada, what's happening in Mexico and Canada. And you will see, you and I probably had that vision that mining means hard hats and spades, dirty business. But you will be surprised to see that today mining is all about AI and machine learning, robotics. By the way, we have been using it in the sector for over a decade because we used it for safety. When we were going to the center of the earth, we wanted to make sure we will send in the robotics and the AI first before we send in humans to make sure it's safe. We wanted to understand the geology of places where probably you and I wouldn't go for vacationing. So we had to scan that out. But when it comes to labor and why I'm still optimistic, and I'll give you an example. I asked the founder of Stardust, why Oklahoma? And he gave me a response which really made me think that he went into Oklahoma, the fact that he's from Oklahoma, but there is also oil and gas labor that has been there. They have been trained in oil and gas refineries. We just need to repurpose that talent. So Stardust is actually talking to schools and colleges at this point, even though the production and the operations will come in a few years. We are talking to the next generation of talent today and talking about the talent that is required and the excitement that is. But in general, what mining sector needs is a little bit of rebranding. We need to make it more tech and not toil. We need to show that mining today, it can be done on an iPad. People are not necessarily sitting in very arduous places. Mining can be very interesting. When NASA comes to mining companies to see what are you doing about autonomous drilling and how do you actually perform, that should tell you that we are actually doing something which is pretty interesting. The next part I will say is, let's talk about what needs to get done. I always say, none of us probably wake up in the morning and tell our kids, make sure you're studying properly so that you can go into a mining sector. But that mining sector, and again, that ecosystem thought process come in. When you go to, if you ever visit any of the OEMs, you will realize they also have manufacturing that's casting metal and prefabbing metal, and they're stamping metal. We are just look at the end product, a car, a beautiful cell phone. But they are also doing a lot of the manufacturing in-house. Let's show the next generation of talent that getting into mining and manufacturing is not a dirty business. We have to do that rebranding, and that's why I direct you towards, their HR team has done such a fabulous job in just talking to children, talking to schools. It's a gold and silver mining company that also is delving into critical minerals. It's called Core Mining. You will absolutely get the free view of what mining can do. You don't need to go to all these places. And the last bit I will say is, what we need in that ecosystem is when the next generation of talent comes in and shows that they can do it better, the concepts around sustainability will be solved, because the new trends on sustainability will come from the sharp brains that are sitting out here and who are considering the technology sector. They will push the mining sector to also do better. So I remain optimistic, but yes, it will be great to have a few more mining engineers coming out of Colorado School of Mining.
That's right. We launched our first cohort of a new partnership with Nomadic Venture Partners, which is a wonderful venture firm that is all about bringing forward more sustainable mining practices. And it was so exciting to be at the Colorado School of Mines. It's my first time visiting, and to see all of the, not only like the people that were being inspired by that, but a lot of the technology on display. It was truly a transformational trip, and to see now we're inspired every day by the companies that are building these technologies and trying to bring them forward. But it was, it's a treasure that we have it.
You reminded me, can I just add one segue? And I will quote this because I wrote it down, the reason I was doing it. Last night, one of Stardust Power's customers texted that they are online and they're connecting from Michigan. So I said, you're making me nervous that now you're going to be in the audience. Second, can you tell me, if you were in the room, what would you say? What should be done? And I will quote her versus saying anything of my own. She said, leapfrog on everything. We need mining in US. We need refining in US, talent, infrastructure, equipment, and we do it the smartest way possible in this time. This is coming directly from those who are going to give you the products that we all love. So I think those words are better than anything that I can say, Karl.
We're getting ready to open it up to audience Q&A. We have about 10 minutes, so we're going to try to move quickly. I will ask that, as your hands go up, you follow the three good rules of question asking. Number one, please state your name. Number two, be as succinct as possible. And number three, please make sure your question is a question. All right, we have one good question here on the iPad, I think, as we're starting to collect. I think this one is excellent. What happens if we lose access to these materials? What's the worst case scenario? Where, say tomorrow there is a total export ban out of China. What does that look like as it trickles through the US economy?
If you ask the mining person in the room, I will say Armageddon, because if there is complete restriction, there is going to be complete restriction on other side as well. We are being tested, the Western world is being tested on its response strategy. So that game theory has probably been played by several people around the world. But one thing I will say is the United States government is actually looking at stockpiling. And that is a brilliant strategy too, which, by the way, happens in other countries. So it's nothing, it's not against the free economy, it's nothing against the free commercial fabric that we promote. Stockpiling will help us keep this afloat.
Questions? Yes, the gentleman right here in front.
Hi there, folks. Thanks for coming in. First off, great breadth of knowledge on the stand. It's really great to hear from you. My name is Ian. I've worked historically in battery materials and now in domestic alumina production. I have a question coming back to this industrial policy thing, specifically with the MP Materials U.S. government stake. So from an industrial policy perspective, totally understand like the price floor helps support an industry. I have trouble more with the equity stake from the government because the U.S. has the best private equity markets in the world, or private capital markets in the world, excuse me. So why is the U.S. taking an equity investment stake in these companies helpful if it's not just to pick a winner?
Do you want me to answer?
Sure.
Okay. Karl,
Please.
I'll take a stab at it. I will ask you why not. Because when the US is coming in as an equity player, it actually gives a confidence to the market. And today the US is actually saying, I'm no longer considering these materials as sand, but as sovereignty. And for the longest time, we actually looked at it as sand that slipped out of our hand versus looking at it as sovereignty. So when the government takes a space, and this is, again, has happened in our history before. It's not new. It's not that other countries haven't used. But in doing so, US is also securing the output that comes out. If you leave it for everything in the private equity side, private equity in the sense of just liquid capital coming in from the private fabric, companies will behave in terms of normal supply-demand opportunities. But in doing so, the money is actually going in to secure the output that is going to come in for our departments that have been lined up. So it's a very smart way of ensuring that that stockpile that I mentioned actually gets stockpiled with the right materials for the right time, and the operations, which, by the way, as you all know, that's where VCs lose us, because any of these mining groups, it requires permitting cycle. There is a proper manufacturing cycle. These things take time. But when the government is one of your equity partners, you know not to mess up. So we will also behave accordingly, and it will accelerate the market. So as you can see, I'm actually sitting on the other side of the table from you to say, I wish there is more. We hope there is more. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, by the way? Okay, thank you.
The gentleman just behind you, in the aisle. There we go.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Adam Gipolo, and I'm an executive over at Resolute Public Affairs, a national public affairs and strategic advisory company headquartered here. I'm also a former emerging leader. My question is actually about the downside risk to China. Given that they've escalated on their rare earth efforts, their economy is very heavily export driven. And if they escalate further, that could shut off foreign markets. They've already had a significant downturn in their economy in the property, real estate market, as well as a host of other domestic demand issues. And they have a demographic issue that's going to start manifesting itself in the next 10 to 20 years. Is this more of a sign of weakness from Xi and the Chinese government long term, given where we're at with the ongoing global trade war?
We're all looking at each other. Who wants to take a bite of the question? All right, I have two eyes looking at me, so I'm going to take a stab and take fun for the team. I wouldn't dare even think about what President Xi's strategy is. It'll be way beyond me. But I will say that I'll answer your commercial question about what it does to the economy of China. If you look at the whole value chain, and there is this fantastic, by the way, when Sky News starts talking about rare earth, you know you have arrived. Mm-hmm. But Sky News did put out this article, which I thought was fantastic. They actually showed the transition of one mine site where it started off as a small pond and has now taken up the whole terrain. But when you look at that and you say, why didn't they stop there? Why didn't they just pick up, excavate, dig it up, garden it, send it out, and we will do it? Instead, if you look at the policies, which, by the way, credit should be due where credit should be due, that was a smart policy. They said, they put in the policies such that the whole supply chain and value chain sits in China. So they will put restrictions on exports and also have value-added tax, that if you actually send out materials which are not fully formed by the user and not at the end point of the supply chain, they get taxed. So naturally, more and more of the supply chain and the value chain, and hence more manufacturing, went inland to China. What happens if you restrict it? The And the example that comes to my mind, if you go and research what China did with iron ore, that will tell you that's a great footprint. They have now formed a consortium of all the steel companies and said, China is going to buy iron ore as one entity. It's a CMFR strategy, but they're basically saying when any company sells into China, they're selling to one entity, which is a state-owned entity. That tells you the power and the amount of no longer thumb, but there is a whole 800-pound gorilla sitting on the scale to help that supply chain and the whole industry. Am I really worried what will happen if they keep doing it? No, I'm not. But am I thinking there might be near-term ups and downs? Yes, but so do we. We have the same. So again, going back to the previous question, if it comes to a screeching halt, what happens? I'd rather not think about it because that scenario will probably be gamed out by somebody who's doing a lot more thinking on this than I dare think. I just want to build the capacity in the US.
Next, he's been waiting. We'll go down here.
Great comments. Appreciate the presentation. My name is Scott Ursum. My background is in global supply chain and operations with Caterpillar Mining. And so I found all your comments just resonated a lot. I'd like someone to comment on leadership talent. You really hit on a key theme that I'm very passionate about, which is ecosystem orchestration. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the skill gaps coming in the area of the talent needed to coordinate ecosystems? And what do we need to do about that?
Can I first jump in just because there he mentioned Caterpillar. So thank you for your business. I actually sit on the board of a Caterpillar dealership out of Canada, so I do have to thank you for that. Maybe I'll start and I'll hand over to my colleagues here. In terms of talent, the gap, actually, I don't foresee any gap that is insurmountable, but it's the willingness. We will need more people who will drive the Caterpillar or haul trucks to make sure that things are happening. But today, those things it's like playing video games with those fantastic things. If you ever get to sit in one of those, I would strongly say do it because it gives you a sense of scale of how small we are. But in terms of real technical knowledge base, I think it's a question of, and this is where AI will be extremely helpful, we need to focus on the geology, excavate faster. Make sure we find the ore bodies, get to it sooner. Make sure we are not spending time on creating those fancy PowerPoint slides, but actually getting down to doing it. And allowing people to see the aspirational side of the sector. In Northwestern and University of Chicago, I am, of course, extremely biased to these two universities sitting here in Chicago. If we actually create critical mineral academies, we can actually talk about it because critical mineral and AI, I'll speak in the same sentence all day long. We can bridge that talent. Today, our talent will go in and pick up a ChatGPT app versus they'll go into one of those haul trucks or get into a mine. But they're so interrelated and there's so much, it's a stretch to say they're similar, but I'll say it. They're very similar. It's like playing video games. The responses are sooner. Let's have the talent go in. I don't think the gap is insurmountable. Today, we have the willingness problem.
A lot to say about this, and I would love to talk more after the program. As a full-time ecosystem orchestrator, that is my entire job, and I work with a group across the country that are orchestrating ecosystems and other very complex, nationally significant challenges. It's a full-time job, so it takes people who recognize that that's the job. It takes a discipline, I think, to understanding that it is all about creating and orchestrating networks, which means, and there's a science of that, right? We are measuring not only how many, the 75 plus partners and 200 people in the coalition that we're managing, but the strength and productivity of those relationships. And I mean, we're fielding network studies to do that, right? So there's a sort of mathematical, quantitative approach that we take to ecosystem orchestration, aligning those strategies. I also think it takes leaders who really have a strong orientation to a non-zero sum approach to some of these problems, and really understanding that there's shared wins that we can align towards and really deliver results together. But lots more to say about that, but I think it's a really interesting and emerging area of leadership.
With that, we have come up on time. So I want to go ahead and wrap up. This topic is going to be increasingly important. I have a feeling it will kind of fade and come into more prominence in the news, but I think it's going to be on an upward trend of how much it's covered and the depth that we're going to see it covered in. The one thing, going back to the question on China, just to give everyone something to think about, you talked about the ability of the United States to innovate, to develop, and to perhaps ramp this up rather quickly. I think that's something that China may see coming as well, because while we're all talking about export controls of the raw materials or the processed materials, the other thing they're doing is they're starting to restrict the industrial side of the machines that are going to be used in the processing technique. And they're starting to restrict the experts who can travel to offer advice to people who are trying to build this out. And so I think that makes me think that they see the clock as ticking, and they're going to try to slow that clock down as much as possible. With that, please join me in thanking both Elena and Paramita, and thank you to everyone for joining.